there's a rapid dropping of the barrier to build any kind of like products and services on the internet. Lots of things can be interoperable. Communities can build something defined by their own goals.
People coming together around a shared vision.
Accessibility for anyone to contribute.
We have ownership over the value that we create.
Art, culture, community.
Just unlocking potential.
In this episode, we explore the idea of collective venturing with Gloria from Cura. We chat about how community entrepreneurs on Farcaster can incentivize the kind of behavior for the community culture they want to cultivate.
I came to the Web3 space a couple of years back because I was seeing technology is the main driver for a lot of creation and social change. It was particularly interesting for me for decentralized data and centralized identity technology. So this whole notion about data sovereignty, identity sovereignty, that was very attractive. Then come to be very interested in reputation because that's like a intersection of identity and also data in general. So I started building with this project called OpenRank, a protocol that provides verifiable reputation scores across the web using open data. And one of the data source that OpenRank was indexing on was social graph, because social graph is inherently peer-to-peer. So it's like very decentralized by nature. And different signals are the social interactions of people on that social graph, and they collectively surface lots of intelligence, who to trust, who do you want to interact with, and who are the people you want to actually subscribe to. They have more reputable things to say, so you want to get information from them. And then we double down on building on Farcaster, and we started to realize that communities on Farcaster need more tooling for building their communities.
I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you are thinking about the importance of community culture as you have discussed in your recent blog post.
In the existing norms of social, right, they all come to the stage where they have to monetize. There's not so many wild imagination space for how to monetize. Basically, that's just advertisement. Then that goal becomes, okay, let's build features that can be a flywheel for people to spend more time to give us their attention so we can monetize that attention. And then that's increasingly the feedback loops driving development of these platforms. Communities are not formed to maximize attention. They're formed for many other reasons. They formed because they share the same goal of trying to explore a topic and get to know more about that topic, share interests and showing support for each other around certain context of life. So all these things are part of a process of cultural formation, and the best community that has like strong nature basically can last and thrive. But do we have tools? Do we have these platforms actually optimized to make this culture stronger? Not necessarily. That the goal is just very different. They want the attention because that's the only thing that they can monetize. They cannot monetize culture. So that's the departure that we see fundamentally from the business model point of view. Probably the differentiation is to build something that is actually optimizing for building community culture, supporting the thriving community. So I think that's both a entrepreneurial opportunity, also a unfulfilled potential for community to actually take their fate in their own hands.
That's really fascinating. Some of my closest friends, our relationship is not maximized for attention. We don't chat all the time, but I'm expecting those few conversations to be super high quality to me, right? Similarly, what would a social platform be like where not everybody shows up all the time? It's not maximized for virality, but for deep engagement that people want to come back to multiple times a week and know that it's going to be good, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But if a platform is not monetizing attention, how do they monetize in order to maintain their infrastructure? Maybe the community pays just because it's a valuable thing, or there's some aspect of the culture that is created in this community that monetizes in some way, something like that?
That's a great question. I would say, for example, as you said, you gather with a bunch of friends, you probably go and play hockey, or you go to a cafe and you basically just have coffee there. Aren't those also infrastructure that actually enable that social to happen?
Yeah.
So we're already paying for the hockey equipment and the coffees and the pastries. So those are actually also like when people see a value of being part of the community, there are ways you can actually monetize the transactions they have, right? Like some creative ideas could include, obviously, when people create great content, those are so useful and informative on a certain topic, that community collectively can issue tokens that represent access to such information. So then when the initial cohort of people already contributed a lot and there's already contents that can benefit other people, then these newcomers could also consume that by holding those tokens, by paying for it in a way. And so it creates like a positive feedback loop, right? So the more people contribute, the higher quality the contents are, well, the more useful they are. And then the more people are willing to be part of that community. First of all, to access it, then later on they can contribute as well and earn that rewards for their contribution. So this is particularly actually something that we're trying to experiment with Cura. Some of the topical communities are interested in growing the subscription, but also having a mechanism to reward people based on their contribution of the content. So that's one example. Maybe another example could be like people basically to watch sports together, they form a community, but they could also do some sort of social betting together, or they can stream the game together. And all these are actually require some sort of infra and features being available in that community. So then the community can actually also benefit from the usage of such infra. We've seen some communities, for example, like 𝗕𝗨𝗡𝗥𝗽 and 𝗩𝗘𝗡𝗥𝗽ᗏ on Farcaster, they're like very much on the creator side of the game. 𝗕𝗨𝗡𝗥𝗽ᗏ have this really interesting idea that they have the community that creates content via these kind of conversations or podcasts. There's always something funny that happens that can become a meme. So then the community can collectively decide which ones have the cultural potential to be infectious and viral and interesting and become a meme. And then they could vote on that, they decide on that, and they can basically bring that meme into a meme coin and see if that culture gets adopted. 𝗩𝗘𝗡𝗥𝗽ᗏ, on the other hand, is more artist centric. There's more art collections being produced by the community, and then people create a fan base of those arts, and then people hold NFTs, people support artists in early creations of those arts. So I think those are also quite generic models that can actually create a variation of that. And there's a space for curation. There's a space for reputation scores. There's a space for knowing who to admit as a member into your community and what to do with them, who is contributing, how do you actually reward them in a fair way. OpenRank built a bunch of reputation scores previously on Farcaster, and we realized that actually these reputation scores are very useful for answering such questions. So then that's how we built this tool called Cura, which is basically a intelligent agent tooling interface for social communities on Farcaster that's giving community the control over curation, ownership, and building the economy of their life. That's a bit of intro for Cura.
Just want to comment quickly on reputation scores, because when I first heard about them, I was like, a score? I don't want a score that represents me. But it's clearly useful, right, within the platform. And a thing I've seen Cura doing is context dependent scores. So the simplest version is a channel score. So you might not have cultivated a great score overall, but within a given channel, you are shown to be a highly trusted person. And you can imagine these sort of context-dependent scores breaking down even more in the future in some way related to a skill or ability or a way that you are trusted or known or show up.
Yeah, you're absolutely spot on. Reputation is a very context-specific thing. That's another learning we had previously with OpenRank, is that there's no such thing called like global scores, because there's so much like different kind of like nuances, right? Somebody is very good at this, like somebody is very good at spotting new members in the community and giving them attention, giving them help, assisting their early journeys are not necessarily the people who are very good at finding useful information and share with the community. So then how do you define reputation? So these are two different verticals of reputation, but they're both very useful for that community. So you have to contextualize that to make it actually useful. Another point you mentioned, I think it's also very important, is this whole scoring thing, right? When it comes to reputation. Definitely, I think score is the worst approximation, but in the digital world, actually lots of things are being scored. It's just that it's not a number to our face. So for example, one of the most important algorithms OpenRAM uses eigentrust. That's the early internet page rank algorithm.
Oh, yeah.
So imagine your social feed. How are the posts are being ranked? There is a score behind it, or else it couldn't be ranked, right? Or when people recommend you, like, these are the people you should follow. There is a score behind, or else they couldn't rank it. So I think that is the interesting part. There's always a score, but how do we make sure that score is actually being used in the right way? So another thing OpenRank does is make this score permissionlessly verifiable. So you're not being ranked like in a black box and you have no transparency, or you're basically just being judged without knowing even like how and if this is fair according to some sort of rule. But permissionless verification, anybody can go and check out. So if you don't agree with certain ways of like recommending things, ranking things, scoring things, just create a different rules and gather people who actually rally around that. But I think that is also the promise of this openness of Web3 that we're trying to fulfill, but we're still very early. So we're starting with social.
Yeah, I'm wondering, building around Farcaster, pushing into this channel-specific client, why focus on building around Farcaster, and what sort of problems are you solving for with focusing on channels?
Communities have only one way of organizing information in the community. You can highcast, you can pin multiple casts, you can pin a conversations thread. So it's no longer just limited to the form factor of Twitter-like information flow that's basically just very fast. You put something there and it's gone within 5 minutes because there's always new information coming up, rather than introducing other sorts of form factors like forums. So there can be consistent conversations around one topic that's always there. There can be like curated feeds, moderators pick really good content and feature them in a different kind of feed and summarize them for the community. There's always a place to go to find the most valuable ones the community think should read. That's more like the information curation, content curation. And the other one is a wallet, which is shared, collectively owned by the entire community, and they can basically have people adding funds to it, then to like collectively reward people in the community, or they can issue their own kind of like community tokens. Does not necessarily have to start with like monetary values, but rather just like a token of recognition or token of ownership for people. So that is like a collective infrastructure for the community. And then there's also the leaderboard, which is using the algorithm and using the curation, automatically knowing who have contributed the most in the last 1 day, last 1 week, last 1 month. There could be points and scores that people see like, oh, I have contributed this much last week. It's a form of recognition for them as well. And if the community decides that they want to reward these people with tokens, they can also do that automatically with one click and basically reward people according to their leaderboard contribution in a given period of time. These are some of the tools that we already made available via Cura. And in the near future, there could be more interesting things that we can build, right? What if people can curate content and they should be rewarded for their curation effort? We have all these great tips about how to actually build a successful startup, how to actually successfully engage with their audience, to have like product market fit and all that sort of tips and experience sharing from other people who are also very credible in that topic. I could subscribe to your feed and then I get this high quality information. But then you can also monetize your effort of curating that information. So this is something that we're definitely very bullish for, and hopefully that we can ship a MVP version for everybody to give feedback.
I'm wondering if we could talk a little bit about incentive mechanisms, going broadly initially and thinking about forming cultures. What aspects make a good culture? You mentioned belonging, identity, trust, recognition. We sort of have a visceral sense of what a good culture is, but then we also know that incentive mechanisms can also mess up a culture, even within a traditional business, right? Having some sort of extrinsic motivation like sales bonuses or whatever can kind of mess up a community culture, or it can augment it, right? If that's the kind of culture you are wanting to cultivate. And then like stock benefit packages, people feel like they can buy into the mission of the business. So I'm wondering how you guys are thinking about that within Cura and within community cultures.
Yeah, definitely. It's such an interesting topic. I think also one of the key learnings of the space is that there should not be hyper financialization of that from day one, right? Most of the very successful communities utilizing a token mechanism has been spending years building on the left of the curve. And that's basically how they actually build consensus over time, Ethereum or Bitcoin. And the ones who are very much in a hurry to peak and then come to the right side within months or weeks or even days, it's really hard to even say their community. Like a bunch of token holders, that's their common denominator, but would you call them a community? I think that's very debatable. So I think that's the first point. The second one is you have to consider what is the valuable contribution in the community. Normally, it's very manual, right? It's very tedious to actually identify who to reward. Any organization, it's difficult to know who to reward and how much. So building like intelligent mechanisms utilizing algorithms and AI to make that easier. I think that's the direction we're trying to address, because supposedly the community already know who are the behavior they want, but like how to actually just capture those data points, label them, and then factor them into a automated process and tweak on that over time, right? You might have different kinds of things you want to index more on at different phases of the community building process. So I think that's maybe the two things I would definitely think are very important for doing this right.
Thinking of a startup that's offering you salary and equity, that incentive mechanism has actually worked successfully to build many workplace communities, right? It's a time-tested thing, helps people build loyalty, trust. In on-chain communities, we haven't found good starting points to actually help people have this long-term mindset, be here for the right reasons. I don't think it's bad that people want to have income to come put forth a high degree of effort, right? That might be a necessary component to build trust, to build culture. There's an intrinsic thing on top of that, right?
You're absolutely right. I think there's a lot of like mechanism design potential in that. If you don't have a stake in a community that is long term, you should not be influencing the community governance or community decision making. And that should be also corresponding to how long do you have it stake, right? I think this is also intuitively true for in real life examples. If you're only in and out in the city and just make money and leave, you don't really care how the city is going to be. If the city is cultivating the right culture, so the artisans are still staying, so there's more to live for rather than just business. So when you have a long-term horizon with the community, then you start to become valuable. You start to accrue such perspectives. And that should also be a learning that we can manifest in the Web3 crypto world.
We're building these digital cities. I'm curious on how Cura is thinking about raising up voices from those without significant social media influence so that they can be seen and heard.
That's a great question. It's eventually a status game. The reason why people want to be influencers is because they get distribution. The algorithm favors people who have distribution. When you're early in the game, the first members of a platform, a lot easier to get attention and followers. It creates its own feedback loop, reinforcing more visibility of what you do and more followers that you can get. The platform algorithms designed that way because they want influencers to stick to that platform. So I think what we're thinking is, how do we offer alternatives of that? We define contribution in a different way, like content that is being cherished by other people, that is more important to be shown with more prominence by the algorithm rather than just you're popular and then whatever you say gets just more attention. And giving the possibility for moderators to also label different users differently based on their different kinds of traits. For example, this moderator in Catwalk, so he was mentioning that he wants to see more video streaming of people walking their cats, not just like posting photos of cats on the street. Then the former is more actually interesting for people, for the community, and encouraging more people to actually walk their cats and spend time with their cats outside. So then how do you also like label that differently and then reward that differently so that incentive catches up with what you want to see in a community? So I think that's also really interesting to explore in the near term.
So you mentioned cities. You can think of a city like roads, sidewalks, and public transit, or like the Farcaster protocol and what Cura is building and other people are building as elements of infrastructure that's interacting with the community. So how do we iterate forward in the next steps? Like the building of cities is kind of an iterative process throughout history. They start in one way, it changes. So where we're at now in terms of the infrastructure, the communities, the people that are here on Farcaster, how do you see us taking the next steps forward in this longer term vision of cultivating a thriving ecosystem here?
Yeah, I think we definitely need to have more community entrepreneurs. Maybe the first step is to make people aware of the existence of such toolings and what these toolings are trying to do, and that is different from what they've learned previously. So they feel more empowered and encouraged to actually try it out and just build communities of various kinds and have different kinds of goals. Very simple, starting from day one, like monetization. And then create this feedback loop of these community entrepreneurs telling these infra tooling builders that what do you need to actually cultivate the culture that you're trying to have in your community, how to preserve that. Like simple tools, for example, like some people have been telling us, I just want an easy way to know who is a new person in my community and then give enough attention to everything they have done, make them feel included, recommending the right things to them, right? How do we do that? And so the tools can be more fine-tuned to satisfy such needs. And then there are more community builders and community entrepreneurs who can be successful with their endeavors.
So more community entrepreneurs becoming successful, and the entrepreneurs will find what we need to build the ecosystem forward.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it's a netizen world, right? So why not create your own subculture, create your own cozy corner instead of seeing things not going your way and retreat from that. So that's my hope and wish for more community entrepreneurs.
If you want to learn more, go to Cura.network and check out @Cura on Farcaster.